And Town Board, we are live.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board meeting of March 19th, 2024. Cheryl, if you could please take the roll call.
Councilmember Fleck.
Present.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Olivia.
Present.
Supervisor Burton.
Present. If everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So let me just start by saying Councilmember Lease will be joining us later. Today at 11 o'clock is the final walkthrough with the Army Corps of Engineers and DEC on the downtown Montauk project. So he's out there representing us. Today's agenda, we start with the public portion, and we ask you to kindly keep your remarks to 3 minutes. And then we have a number of topics. We'll start with Jeannie Carrozza. We'll be doing bids, and in particular, the Montauk Child Care Center. Town Administrator Becky Hansen will be here to go through the 2024 capital plan. We've got a presentation by Peter Flinker, Lisa LaCorey, and Vin Corrado for the Springs Corridor Study. Kate Rogers will be leading a discussion of all electric. Our town attorney, Rob Connolly, will discuss draft FOIL legislation. If David is back in time, he will give us an update on FIMP, and Kate will give us an update on ditch plains. So let's start with public portion. A few folks have signed up. First up is Frank Rena. Welcome, Frank.
Hello.
It's been a while.
It has been a very long while, approximately since COVID started. But I've been here in the background. By the way, congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
My name is Frank Rena. I live in Springs. And today I'm going to be addressing the corridor study. And I understand it's going to proceed later on in the presentation. Okay. The corridor is a comprehensive, thoughtful, and an intelligent document. The study, I mean. An important part of the study is dedicated to the safeguarding of our water resources. The industries situated along the corridor are vital to our community. These same industries pose a significant threat to our sole source aquifer due to their location above the special groundwater protection area, especially since these industries exist within a dated infrastructure. It is extremely important to find a way to ensure the continuation of these industries while simultaneously implementing measures to safeguard groundwater. A crucial first step towards understanding the complexities of these dual objectives is the creation of legislation mandating groundwater testing. Groundwater testing will offer a scientific foundation for decision-making, rather than working under the assumption that the special groundwater protection area is not being harmed by the industries above it. Over the last decade, there has been a notable increase in CI development along the corridor, and many additional projects are in the pipeline. These new developments will proceed through a process that already exists. I lost track. Implementing environmental safeguards will require zoning changes, new legislation, and enhanced enforcement protocols. Achieving these safeguards will be arduous and demand steadfast dedication in the face of strong opposition. Safeguarding our sole source aquifer will require an accelerated process. Compliance should be based upon enforcement of best practices rather than mere encouragements. The pressing question now is whether the study's findings will translate into actionable measures. capable of addressing the corridor's challenges in real time before irreparable damage is done to our water resources. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Frank. Next up, we have Tom McMorrow. Welcome, Tom.
Hi. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the board. I appreciate it very much. I first addressed this board, I think it was August of last year, about the overdevelopment of 94 South Euclid Avenue, and specifically the alleyway that was built up instead of the approved 1.5 inches of asphalt to 1.5 feet or more. Then the planning department took it upon themselves. They put forth an excellent memo. There was a hearing, or not a hearing, rather a discussion about the matter in front of the East Hampton Town Planning Board on November 15. And Ian Calder Piedmont, congratulations, was the liaison for the planning board to myself, to the owners of the property. I think one of them is going to be calling in, Lee Bierce, and also to the owners of the property of 94 South Euclid and their attorneys, etc. And I'm sure Ian can reinforce this point, perhaps an executive session, I don't know, but the outcome of that discussion was clear when it came to the alleyway. The outcome was that whatever is done to remediate the damage that had been done, it must be to the full satisfaction of the owners of 813 Montauk Highway, which is the property that I am the tenant of. So that was clear at the end of that discussion, and Ian made that point very clearly. And now we fast forward to February 7. On February 7, the planning department adopted a proposal by Drew Bennett as a remediation, but that was never approved by the owners, which was the point that was made on November 15. It was never approved. And yet the East Hampton Town Planning Board Chair, Samuel Kramer, basically rammed it through. It should not have been on the agenda. There were 2 new board members that night. Neither of them, and one of them obviously was replacing Ian, should have been acting as the liaison. Neither of them ever reached out to anyone on our side. And there was a board member missing. So how do you have that vote? I don't get it. And I think it was done improperly. After that, I wrote a letter to the board. And then on February 16, at 9:40 p.m., my wife and I were in bed. All the lights were out in the house and on the property, as always is the case for our 30 years in Montauk. And I got up to get myself a can of seltzer. We keep the cases down by the door, especially in the winter, because it's pretty cold down there. So I was going down the stairs. I was about 3 feet from the front door when this gloved fist smashed through the panel of glass on the front door closest to the doorknob. The doorknob flew off, by the way. That's how hard the impact was on the door. And I started to scream. Rhett Beckman, one of the owners of 94 South Euclid Avenue, was outside my door after smashing it, and he panicked. He wasn't expecting me to be there when he smashed through that panel of glass. And my question would be, what was your true intention? What was the next step after you smashed that panel of glass? He ran back towards his property. My wife called the police. They were there within a minute. He was arrested. He was held overnight. And my wife and I were issued a stay-away order of protection from him. It should not have come to this. if you don't obey laws, if you don't obey rules, if you encourage the idea that what you're doing is better, so it's okay, don't worry about it, you get lawlessness. Twice since then, twice since that night, our property has been vandalized. Twice. And God knows what's going to happen now. But I don't know, Lee's going to talk, Lee Bierce. Maybe the answer is just surrender, just give in. This is what the town wants to cram down? Fine, I guess that's it. But I really do think this board needs to take over that question of that alleyway. That alleyway belongs to you, it belongs to me, it belongs to all the people of East Hampton, not to the owner of 94 South Euclid Avenue, and not to us. I really appreciate your time. I just think that this board needs to step in and take action, because I think that the East Hampton Town Planning Board and even the planning department, after their hard work on it, but I think they've kind of let things get out of control. And that's why we are where we are. I thank you very, very much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. Next up is Bob Pine. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Pine. I am going to discuss the report on the corridor, the Springs Fireplace corridor, and just one aspect of it. Frank has talked about the need for water protection. I'm going to talk about the need for changing the regulations regarding site plans. Several of the site plans that were approved by the planning board have no building on them, and there is no requirement that a plan without a building needs a C of O before the owners of that project can begin operating and earning money from the project that has been approved by the board. There are at least 2 properties there that have continued to operate their business without a C of O and have not completed the plan as approved by the planning board. There is no incentive because there's no blocking of their ability to earn money from their project if there is no requirement of a C of O. One of the projects is at the end of the 3rd year of receiving a building permit. The building permit cannot be renewed, and yet for the last 3 years, that particular project has been making money for the owner, and they have not completed the plan. And that basically, the streetscape is not being improved as a result of that. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else here that would, David? Welcome, David.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you very much. David Buda from the Springs. I'm glad to see that the topic of the town's implementation of the state Freedom of Information Law in Town Code Chapter 2, entitled Access to Public Records, will be a topic of discussion during today's work session. It's a little unclear exactly what Mr. Connolly is going to discuss and suggest, but I'm open, my ears are open to any improvements and assurances that the law is fully complied with. While nearly all of the town departments to which I often submit FOIL requests are exemplary in their responsiveness, for example, the assessors, the building department, the planning board, and the town consulting engineers staff, there are some town agencies that maintain public records that could vastly improve their compliance with this state and town law. I'm thinking particularly about the Ordinance Enforcement Department. May I also suggest that it's time for you to review the current provisions of Town Code Chapter 39, entitled Meetings to ensure full and proper implementation of the provisions of the state open meetings law, which essentially is a corollary to the Freedom of Information law. As I have stated on prior occasions, the town can and should do a better job of making available to the public in advance of various public board meetings all public records concerning matters that are scheduled to be the subject of discussion by a public body during an open meeting. That's what the open meetings law states should be the requirement. Perhaps the most significant example of this aspect of the open meetings law and Freedom of Information law is when an elected or appointed town board has scheduled the consideration of adopting a resolution to settle pending litigation. It's essential that the terms of the proposed settlement be spread upon the record in advance of the meeting when the agenda is published. Egregious examples of non-compliance have occurred recently at the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Architecture Review Board. At the March 5th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the board did discuss in public and adopt by a majority vote, with some dissent, two resolutions approving proposed settlements of litigation commenced by applicants Lori Chembla and Gablax Manor LLC. However, the terms of the proposed settlement agreements were not made available to the public in advance. Moreover, when I checked the ZBA file after the meeting for, in particular, the Gablax Manor case, there was only a copy of the resolution authorizing stipulation of settlement agreement, which contains a lot of boilerplate. But there was no copy of the referenced actual stipulation and settlement agreement, which would necessarily detail in what manner the original determination by the ZBA dated September 26, 2023, was to be altered and amended. This lack of full public disclosure is made all the more bizarre by the fact that on March the 12th, Judge Paul Hensley issued the court's order completely denying the applicant's application and dismissed the Article 78 petition in toto. The court held that, quote, the decision of the board to deny area variances was not arbitrary and capricious, which exactly is the standard in an Article 78 case. I have a handout for you of a copy of that decision, which I'll give you when I finish speaking. Also on March the 14th, the ARB met, and the first matter of business conducted was the pro forma announcement that the ARB had met with counsel and had agreed to two proposed stipulations of settlement of Article 78 litigation, one of which was the suit commenced by Honest Man LLC concerning the street-facing facade color of the restaurant Rowdy Hall located in the Amagansett Historic District. These matters were not published on the agenda in advance of the meeting. No discussion of the exact terms or general terms of the proposed Rowdy Hall settlement agreement occurred, and no actual vote on the resolutions approving the proposed settlements were taken. Although I have not yet checked the ARB file, I'm going to assume that the actual language of the stipulation of settlement and the terms of the underlying agreement would not be found in the public file, just as it wasn't and isn't in the Gablax ZBA file. Now, let me turn briefly to a quick general discussion of litigation. The town has, because we have developers in this community that want what they want and want it now, we have a lot of litigation brought against CBA, ARB, the town board. And the town board has the opportunity to provide independent counsel to assist those boards in defending those cases, but lately it has not done so. I utilize the available resources to keep track of litigation. Unfortunately now, Article 78 litigation does require everything to be e-filed so that every document is available to the public. What I've noticed and what I'm concerned about is that in several matters of late, those boards, ZBA and ARB, have been defended by the town council, which is obviously part of the town board's staff and departments, and not independent counsel. And yet, not a single, in several of these cases, not a single opposing document has been filed. Not a single record or return has been filed. It's as if we're going back to the days of Mr. Sedlensky in 2018, when a slew of litigation is filed and the town does not defend itself by filing any opposing papers, does not even keep the boards fully informed of the course of litigation. And then ultimately, a settlement springs forth from who knows where near the end of the case and is essentially rammed down the throats of the boards. That's not the way that litigation should be conducted. It's not good for the town. It's not good for the boards. I don't think it's good for the town attorney's office to be required to defend all of these cases when you have, in many instances in the past, retained competent outside counsel to handle the trial court defense of the Article 78s.
David, I ask that you wrap up, please.
Yes. One last thought. You have retained outside counsel in several of these cases to handle the appeals, but obviously if they were to be brought in at the trial level, you would probably get a better overall result. So I promise you a copy of the decision which denied the petition, even though town seems intent on settling the case. Thank you. This is the Gabjacks Manor case, which is on Board of Appeals.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Prudence, please.
Since
Good
I
to
have
see
not
you.
seen you all, since you all took your seats, congratulations. My name is Prudence Talmadge, Hamilton, Carabine, and and at the age of 76, enjoy using my energy to do all I can to keep Bonnick alive. The Farm Museum opens on the 20th of April with David Cataletto discussing rum running, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The following day at the Presbyterian Church at 5, there will be a concert to raise money for Matt Lester's garden. For those of you who don't know, Matt Lester was a wonderful guy who did a lot of things for the museum as well as for the church and the community. And at the age of 18, he decided he could no longer cope with life. So the garden has been put together by his mother and his family, and Dana has been struggling, as many of you may know, and the church has offered to do a fundraiser to help replant, after 6 years now, some of the plants and to manage some of the weeding that happens in the summer that she can't manage. So Presbyterian Church, 1 o'clock concert, benefit Matt Lester. And then finally, I am so pleased to tell you all that our building permit for the Farm Museum barn has been placed in the hands of Ray Harden at Benny Kropinski's place. And we are going to build a barn to take Mike Collins's vehicles in, and we're going to do it with the help of the community. In other words, a barn raising under the auspices of Ray Harden. So yes, we will have hammers, and yes, we will have paperwork to make sure everybody knows they signed off on their insurance. And yes, we will do everything possible to make this a wonderful weekend and raise that barn and get those vehicles appropriately under cover. So this is a project that some of you may know has taken me since before COVID to accomplish. And we're going to do it now this summer. So I thank you very much for recognizing we need to cover the wonderful artifacts that we have at the barn, at the farm. Thank you.
Thank you, Prudence. Would anyone else like to address the board? Do we have anyone on the phone line?
That we do. Give me one moment to unmute the first caller.
Hi,
Call.
this is Francesca. Oh, is it me?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, great. So this is Francesca Rhiannon. I'm just calling in to support the passage of our own East Hampton all electric new building act legislation. Yes, New York State has passed this, but it won't start until next year. And there is a kind of glaring omission in the New York State legislation, which is that they have a different way of constructing the word new than Suffolk County does. And that Suffolk County says that when you tear down a house and completely rebuild it, it's new. But New York State says, no, it's not new. So the law does not apply to that. It will only apply to undeveloped buildings on previously undeveloped land. And given that in this community, so many of our new construction is on the basis of land, where there was a house before that was torn down, or there is a substantial renovation that is more than 50%. If we want to really make our homes, the new homes that people move into, much healthier and cleaner and less polluting to our environment, using 21st century technology like heat pumps, the new cold climate heat pumps are 300 to 500% efficient. They are totally efficient. That is, they put out 3 to 5 times the amount of energy they actually use, and they are cheaper to operate, and they also go down to well below zero in terms of, which is something we're not even seeing here anymore, but in terms of retaining their full efficiency. And so I just think we need to adapt the state law to our own situation here and really make it count, and do that by passing our own legislation that would start a year earlier and would really apply to a more substantial number of new construction than the New York State law does. And I want to thank you for your time, and that's it for me.
Thank you, Francesca. Is there anyone else on the line?
There is two other callers on the line. Caller 2111, you are on the air.
Good morning. This is Lee Burse calling from Maine. I am the co-owner of 809-813 Montauk Highway. Caught up in an alleyway issue caused by a new construction project on the property directly behind us, 94 South Euclid. The town of East Hampton owns the alleyway between us, and our access to our property has been cut off since July 15th, 2023, when asphalt and fill were added, raising the level of the alleyway almost 18 inches above the existing topographic conditions. Resolving this issue has been one-sided, giving 94 South Euclid all the power and decision-making to do whatever they please. Their lawyer and engineer have only briefly asked for our input and have submitted plans on a take-it-or-leave-it basis. We have finally decided to accept the latest proposal with a few modifications and assurances that we will have some access to our property, parking, and the removal of the tip-up behind 809 to remove the tripping hazard. The Town Planning Board, in my opinion, has not done a fair and equitable job of making sure that approved site plans are actually followed. This is a case of don't ask for permission, but ask for forgiveness. Well, they received it. The only small modification or change that they must make to the long list of issues is to the alleyway and to allow us some access to our property. I certainly appreciate this opportunity to voice my concerns to the board. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Lee. We have another caller.
We do. Caller 3691.
Good morning. This is Lena Tabori. I'm a member of the Energy and Sustainability Committee that advises the town board on matters of energy and sustainability. You have on your agenda today the All Electric Buildings Act, for which I'm extremely grateful. This is not the first work session on this particular recommendation from the committee, so I'm not going to bore you all with all the things that you've heard before. I just want to reiterate that our hope is that new buildings as of January 1st, 2025, as Francesca defined them correctly, will be all electric in their heating and cooling systems and their hot water boilers. It is clear from every study that we've read that the methane that seeps both inside the house and outside from the fossil fuels that would otherwise be fueling homes is unhealthy. It's unhealthy for the people inside, it's unhealthy for the climate, and it's unhealthy for the people outside. It is our hope that you will move forward now swiftly with this legislation, which, by the way, it will be a long time before we affect much of the housing stock in East Hampton. 95 permits were approved last year for new construction, and at that rate, it'll be a while before we have any real impact. But we have to start somewhere, and this seems like a place to start. I want to just mention too quickly, I know that many people feel that because the electrical grid isn't entirely renewable at the moment, it won't actually even do as much good as we hope it will to switch over to electric. But the grid is getting cleaner all the time. And as many of you noticed, for example, the South Fork Wind Farm became operative last week. That is, by the way, the first offshore wind project in the nation, and we made it happen. It's an extraordinary accomplishment for the town, and it will provide energy for close to 70,000 homes in Long Island and the Rockaways. This is a marvelous thing and will impact upon the cleanliness of our immediate grid. I thank you for your consideration. I hope we can move this swiftly ahead, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lena. Is there anyone else on the line?
We have no other callers at this time.
One last call here in the main meeting room. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Okay, so we'll move on to topics. First up is Jeannie Carrozza with bids. Welcome, Jeannie.
Good morning. A few items today. The first is the acceptance of the annual traffic signal maintenance contract, and the apparent low bidder is Hink Electrical Contractor for that one. Also, I have a resolution on to join, once again, the joint municipal bidding cooperative with Eastern Suffolk BOCES. The rate for 2024 is $3,138, and We use it consistently, and it's very useful to all the departments. Several notices coming up for RFPs and bids. First is an employee medical benefits program. Next is a bid for the compliance work at the airport fuel farm. Supply and delivery of Hino Auto Parts, the supply and delivery of international parts, and then a notice for boarding services for dogs. So a variety of items. And lastly, we did an RFP for the infant to 4-year child care provider services at the Montauk Playhouse, and Diane Patrizio from the Director of Human Services is here with the recommendation from the committee.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Good morning, Supervisor and Town Board members. I'm Diane Patrizio, Director of Human Services. In reference to RFP EH 2024-102 to provide infant to 4-year-old child care services provider at the Montauk Playhouse, the Evaluation Committee reviewed all respondents' proposals and all were found qualified. The Evaluation Committee attended a face-to-face interview with each of the respondents, at which time they made presentations, asked questions, and questions were answered. All were once again found qualified. It is the opinion of the Evaluation Committee that Project MOST put forth the best plan to keep the existing child care center running. Project MOST has been serving the East Hampton community for 20 years. They plan to begin by observing the program and listening to the needs and wants of family, staff, and community. And Project MOST feels it's essential to align their organization with the Montauk community and their needs. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane. So I understand, Tom, that resolution is going to be on for Thursday.
That is correct.
And having talked with Becky Hansen, our town administrator, what we'd like to do is send out a letter tonight to the families that attend the Montauk Child Care Program, let them know that the board has had a conversation. It's been proposed that we go with Project MOST, unless anyone has any questions for Diane or Jeannie, that's something we're going to move forward with. We'll take a formal vote on Thursday night. And we've also discussed that it's going to take time for them, for Project MOST, to get all their certification in place. And we are looking to give an emergency grant to the EOC so that they continue their program until the first week of July, so that there's no break in service for our hardworking families in Montauk.
Yeah, I'd just say thank you to the town, especially the town administrator, who's been exceptionally effective in getting that organized.
So that's good news for families. Okay, next up is we have the 2024 capital plan with our town administrator, Becky Hansen. Welcome, Becky.
Good morning, everybody. If you don't mind, just for a minute, I just want to touch base on one of the RFPs that Jeannie had mentioned earlier, just so as not to scare anybody. I know it's not maybe my place at the moment. However, she had mentioned putting out an RFP relating to employee health benefits. And just to clarify that for just our employees who may be listening, or members of the public, as part of the CSCA settlement last year that the town had and other employee contracts concerning non-bargaining units and department heads, the town agreed to seek out an HMO type insurance provider for health insurance to hopefully be able to provide employees with a less costly plan. NISHIP is a wonderful health insurance plan. However, it is extremely expensive. And a majority, I would say at this point, of the town's employee base are making some level of contribution to those plans, whether you're single or family. And obviously with the increasing costs, we currently pay over $3,800 a month for a family plan, and a single plan is more than half that. So while settling those contracts, the town board and the union decided that let's put out an RFP at some point and let's try to offer a less expensive plan to our employees. So we are hopeful, fingers crossed, by putting out that that RFP that will be available after Thursday, that the town will get a response back that'll be beneficial for the town and for the employee.
So we'll be offering choice.
Yes.
And what we've talked to some of the younger folks in our, that work for the town, it would mean more, they don't need, like someone like myself. I like the Empire Night Shift. It's a tremendous program, but it is costly.
Very costly.
And so it will, there'll be more money in their check if we go with a lesser HMO plan, less benefits and, less premium.
Right. So we're hopeful that we will get some responses to that RFP once it goes out. So I just wanted to explain that a little more for everybody. I didn't want to scare anyone that there was going to be a change with health insurance. So,
right.
Anyway, so back to the capital plan. I was here last week to present the first draft of the 2024 capital plan. The first draft had proposed total spending at just over $15 million. Based on discussions from last Tuesday and with the town board since then, there have been a few additions, not too many, that I'm happy to report to this new second draft of the plan. Proposed spending total overall, the plan itself will be $18.9 million. This is a proposed $4.7 million increase from the adopted 2023 capital plan. The 2024 plan proposes to issue $11.3 million in new debt, which is the same exact amount that you are retiring in principal debt for 2024. The revised draft from last Tuesday includes a new pickup truck for the Office of the Fire Marshal for additional staff and also to comply with new OSHA regulations that will be coming. It moves from year 2025 to 2024, an additional payloader for sanitation. And the first draft of the plan had proposed new construction for a multi-use turf field at Stephen Hans Path. The first draft had engineering funded for 2024 and construction for 25. The entire project has been moved into 2025.
Which was at the request of Councilmember Lee.
Yes. So the town board has initially agreed to that. This does so in order to offset those spending increases, we are proposing some changes on the revenue side as well. In the new draft of the plan, there is a proposal to purchase some of the, in the planning department, using energy sustainability funds that have been previously approved by the board to purchase energy efficient vehicles. There are additional grant opportunities. For example, the Stephen Hans Path field project could be eligible for up to $500,000 from the New York State Consolidated Funding Application Program, which we are currently researching as we speak. So we are hopeful that that could be a prime project. Again, could be funded up to $500,000. In addition, we are looking at the Suffolk County Downtown Revitalization Program to offset some funding as well. So we are also including some general capital reserve funds, which each of the town's major funds has its own capital reserve fund. We are proposing allocating a small amount of money for a purchase there as well. So that brings up, we were proposing about a 9% overall use of fund balance from year end 2022, and that has gone up to a proposed amount of 10% for the board to consider. If there are no other changes to this plan, I would recommend the board adopt it on March 21st, the meeting this Thursday. Then that way the town board can start issuing or approving all of the debt resolutions at your April meeting and approving the transfer of funds from fund balances from each one of the funds into the general fund, so those projects can begin as well.
Terrific. Does anyone have questions for Becky? Is everybody comfortable with the capital plan and approving it this Thursday?
Yes. Yes.
Comfortable. I think this is a really good job, Becky, by you again, with making sure that the town is constantly having projects to improve things for the community, and also being conservative with our spending. So I think it's a great balance.
Thank you. Terrific. Okay. With no other comments, then I will draft a resolution for your approval on Thursday. Thank you.
Becky. All right, next up, we have the Springs Corridor Study. We've got Lisa LaCory here. Kate, if you wanted to say a few words of introduction.
Just briefly, the Springs Corridor Study is for an area that's actually, because it says Springs Corridor Study, people think that this study is in Springs, but it's the Springs Fireplace Road Corridor Study.
which does greatly impact the residents of Springs. And that's why we have residents of Springs here today voicing their opinions and concerns in public portion. This study was begun by Kathy Burke-Gonzalez when she was the liaison to Springs before me, and now Ian Calder-Piedmont is joining in on the study and getting it across the finish line. Lisa LaCourie from Dotson and Flinker and Fine Arts Sciences and L.K. McLean Associates were all part of the study. I first became aware of this study when I was a resident of Springs, and Kathy had engagement sessions for the community that were enlightening. And it was the first time I saw that kind of interactive process where folks went up and pinned maps and gave in their ideas, and that was at the library, the East Hampton Library. So that was my first introduction to this, and I'd like to introduce Lisa LaCourie to present the draft report summary.
Thank you, Kate.
Could you just pull the mic down, Lisa?
Sure. Is this better? Okay.
Perfect.
Good morning. I think it's still morning, Madam Supervisor, members of the town board, and happy first day of spring.
Yes.
I'm here with my colleagues virtually, Vin Corrado of McLean Associates and Peter Flinker of Dotson Flinker.
Can we let them in, please, if they're not already in?
They are in. They should be able to speak.
All right, great.
Okay, great. As Kate has said, we're here to talk about how the Springs Fireplace Road Corridor Study was developed, what the report findings and recommendations are, and what the next steps are. So just as a brief review, what are the boundaries? The study area starts at the intersection of 3 Mile Harbor Road and Springs Fireplace Road at North Main Street, goes up on Springs Fireplace Road up until it intersection with Floyd Street, east on Floyd Street until it hits Accabonac Road, north on Accabonac Road till it hits Abrams Path, west across Abrams Path to 3 Mile Harbor Road, and back down to the beginning at North Main Street. The corridor study is an intensive evaluation of the traffic, land use, and environmental issues affecting the Springs Fireplace Road and the surrounding area through a collection and analysis of existing conditions, the projected build-out conditions and issues facing the area, recommendations to improve the functionality and the visual character of the area, while also reducing potential environmental threats are offered. The recommendations include roadway circulation, parking and traffic improvements, open space, greenway recommendations, planning and zoning techniques, potential capital improvements, acquisition priorities. And going back to the development of this, it's really been a focus of planning for a long time. This area was part of both the Springs and the East Hampton Hamlet studies. And this particular study began in earnest in February 2020, right before the spread of COVID and the lockdown that occurred. So the workshop that occurred in 2020 at the library fleshed out a long list of traffic problems in the area, adding up to major headaches, problems stemming from a combination of through traffic and corridor turning movements, intersection issues, magnifying the conflicts between residential, commercial, and industrial uses. There is a recognition that town facilities add to traffic issues and a need to balance growth with the capacity of roads and intersections, and the request to explore design solutions before limiting future growth. There was also issues about the environment. Dirt, dust, odor impacts the quality of life. It's a concern for public health, a concern for the pollution of the groundwater, air, and soil, lack of adequate road buffers and street trees to screen industrial uses, concern for code enforcement, irregular uses, construction yards, truck parking, temporary storage areas. They challenge zoning and code enforcement, and you heard a little bit about that earlier today. In terms of land use, there's a need to plan for cumulative impacts, The demand for outdoor storage, trade contractors, and service commercial uses is growing, and the need to limit trade parade and keep trucks out of the neighborhoods was expressed. The sand mine and commercial industrial uses have grown over time. We need more effective planning and management. There are opportunities to use the land more efficiently and explore new uses, enhance open space and wildlife habitat. So mapping the public comments, you see a high concentration along Springs Fireplace Road, odors from the mulching operations, too many curb cuts, drag out of dirt from the trucks, congestion from slow-moving vehicles, conflicts between cars and bicycles. Now, we note that after this study began, the county installed 5-foot shoulders or bike lanes for the entire length of the Springs Fireplace Road. So there's been some activities in the meantime. In terms of strengths and conservation priorities, water quality needs protection, commercial and industrial uses in the area are important to the town's economy. Retaining the existing affordable residential neighborhood is important. Scenic and historic resources are important assets, and preserving the link with open space is critical. Important assets include the Sherrill Farm, the Fowler House in Freetown neighborhood, potential scenic road corridors along 3 Mile Harbor Road and Accabonac Road, and that this is one of the main commercial industrial districts in the town, and it plays an important role in the economy. There are opportunities to support roadway improvements and landscaping. There was a recommendation to consider a roundabout at North Main Street intersection, integrate pedestrian connections, trails, and green space with surrounding areas, plan for the cumulative impact of existing development, approve plans and potential future growth, and enhance scenic and historic character and maintain the area as the heart of East Hampton community life. So opportunities include paving Washington Avenue and extending it to the north, pursuing landscaping and beautification along the corridor, and not all opportunities that were identified have been pursued, such as connecting Ohio Street and Dayton Avenue from Springs Fireplace Road to Accabonac Road. So what's happening in the area? What is the potential build out or the amount of development that could occur if no zoning changes were made? And Peter will walk us through how this analysis was conducted.
Good morning, everyone.
Peter.
One of the things we did was prepare detailed base maps of the entire study area, try to get a sense of what current conditions are about. And then we prepared what we call a build out, which is essentially trying to estimate based on current zoning, the current level of development and future potential under the zoning, how many dwelling units, how many square foot of new commercial and industrial development are possible. And so that starts with what we call a build out status map, which is really going through a process of elimination to map out, as shown here, all the land that's currently fully developed under the zoning, which is in kind of the purple tone. Then we mapped out approved plans, which at that point, when we started the project, some of these were just underway and hadn't started construction. Some of them, like the new affordable housing, are under construction now. So we sort of identified all of those. And then looking at what land is town-owned and probably not going to change in use. And then that leaves in yellow the vacant or subdividable land, which is probably where the bulk of future development is going to take place. And that amounts to something like 275 acres made up by 182 different parcels, ranging from 2,000 square feet to 62 acres. And all but 13 of those are less than 13 acres. And the next slide shows sort of an estimate of future growth trends. There was about 110 existing residential lots and new lots that hadn't been developed in residential zones that could be developed for homes. There was the 50 units of the affordable housing project. and scattered commercial industrial development possible. But the largest site, of course, is the current gravel pit areas amounting to about 120 acres or over 5 million square feet of land area. And under the current zoning, which allows building coverage of 50% and lot coverage of 75%, and subtracting area that you would have to have for roads and parking, we came up with a potential for 1.75 million square feet of potential development. And this would likely be divided with a new subdivision road into 25 or 30 subdivision lots. Now, thing to keep in mind, this is a theoretical exercise. None of this is likely to happen anytime soon, and certainly we want to emphasize that none of the landowners have put forward a plan to do any of this. So this is really just to get a sense of what's possible under the zoning. Also, it's going to reflect market demand, economic feasibility, other engineering constraints like providing wastewater and water supply, and then, of course, traffic constraints, which we'll hear about in a few minutes from Vin.
Right, so we have a substantial amount of new development that can occur in this area, and Vin will explain how traffic volumes without any new growth, with the recently approved private developments, and with projected growth will affect the roadway and recommendations for transportation improvements. Vin.
Right. And good morning. I made it under the wire. It's still morning. So this slide shows the critical intersections that were identified during the study process, and they are starting all the way down on the bottom, North Main Street at Springs Fireplace / 3 Mile Harbor, and then 3 Mile Harbor at Abraham's, and then the two offset intersections of Abraham's at Springs Fireplace. Also shown on this slide are the levels of service based on the 2020 traffic volumes that were developed. At the beginning, as Lisa said, the study started in 2020, and we did intersection capacity analyses to determine the levels of service at these intersections for 2020, and then projected them to 2040, the 20-year horizon year being standard for design of intersection improvements. And you can see that in the existing condition, the 2020 condition, several of the intersections were experiencing and continue to experience poor levels of service. And projected out to 2040, most of the intersection locations show deterioration, obviously, in levels of service. And we could go to the next slide. Right. This slide just shows the level. All of these intersections, by the way, are unsignalized intersections. They're stop or yield controlled. And this slide just shows the standard description, the seconds per vehicle of delay associated with those letter values for levels of service. And you can see that level of service F at 3 out of the 4 intersections. So based on that, and based on the input that we received during the course of the study, and as described by Lisa previously, we developed some intersection improvements for these 4 locations, and also some recommendations for implementation, which we can go into later. So this is intersection 1. This is the current recommended improvement for the North Main Street at the 2 County Road intersections. It involves construction of a roundabout. You can see at the bottom of the slide, there's some information with respect to the construction cost for this improvement, and that it will accommodate traffic growth out to 2040, as I said, plus an additional 110 vehicles during the peak hour, providing, anticipating that there would be some development. And this has been identified as the preferred alternative for this intersection. And that's okay. Go ahead. All right, and to a lesser degree, at these other intersections, which are much less complicated, we also developed recommended improvements. Westbound Abraham's Path at 3 Mile Harbor Road, just a widening of the Abraham's Path approach to provide two lanes to the intersection approach. And then you can go to the third one. And this is the offset intersection of Abraham's at Springs Fireplace Road, where we conceptually developed improvements with two offset traffic circles, roundabouts more appropriately. And this is a fairly common strategy, becoming a more common strategy for intersections like this. So we can go to the next one and we can talk about some of the recommendations for implementation. As Lisa said before, the county had plans at the beginning of the study to improve both of their county roads, Springs Fireplace and 3 Mile Harbor Road. And Springs Fireplace Road has been improved, but 3 Mile Harbor Road was deferred. The improvement on 3 Mile Harbor Road was deferred. I believe it's currently scheduled to be for construction in 2026. So what our recommendation was, and actually we pursued this with Suffolk County, was to see if they would consider incorporating construction of that roundabout into their 3 Mile Harbor Road improvement program. We've since been in touch with the county during the course of the study, and they asked for some additional analysis, which we conducted for them and provided to them, and they are considering it. They had a scheduled meeting internally to discuss it, and we have not heard back from them yet. The meeting was scheduled for this month, so we're waiting to hear back from them on that. Since that, moving on to the next 3 intersections, actually, our recommendation at this time is to defer those improvements until after we can determine whether and what impact the county's improvements have had on the operation of those 2 intersections, and maybe reconsider the implementation of those recommended improvements at that time, or maybe moving it into the future, depending on what improvements we see as a result of the county's projects. Okay, you can go to the next. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. This is you were at the next already. I'm sorry. So these are additional improvements outside those intersections that we identified. Washington Avenue. Lisa touched on this before. Improving that and extending that roadway. I believe part of the right-of-way would have to be obtained from Bistrian. But it would, doing this improvement would help to get rid of a number of curb cuts, access points on Springs Fireplace Road. And then also during the course of the study, the flooding issues were identified on Floyd Street, which obviously the town should take steps to improve that. And these are other implementation. The county should, for bike use, the county should consider. I believe that the 3 Mile Harbor Road project does include bike lanes and accommodations for pedestrians coming up in 2026. And once that's developed, Abraham's Path makes a logical point for bike lanes to connect those 2 facilities. And obviously, like I said, on Springs Fireplace Road, they did install continuous pedestrian path on one side or the other, and that is also, from what I understand, being included in the 3 Mile Harbor Road improvement by the county. This is just an update on the bus service. Suffolk Transit recently completed their reimagining transit study and kind of developed a completely new network for bus services, sparse in East Hampton, obviously. The 10B is the bus that serves the study area now. It is scheduled to be eliminated and replaced with on-demand service, but that implementation has been delayed. They have implemented on-demand service in Southampton, and the indication is that it's been successful. So at the present time, 10B service continues unchanged from prior, but the transition is still planned. These are other transportation strategies outside putting down more asphalt or building new intersections that could manage traffic. The first one is things that the town could do to control the amount of traffic that that is allowed onto the roadways. And if you those three bullets talk about requiring traffic studies for proposed projects to identify potential traffic generation and mitigation, and then implement measures to prohibit projects that would have significant impact, level of service impacts, and the obviously prohibiting specific uses that are high traffic generators like car washes. And there's been a real proliferation in applications for last mile and logistics center warehouses all over Long Island. So I don't believe there have been any yet in East Hampton, but Southampton has seen them, and a number of them in Brookhaven. Transportation demand strategies, staggered work hours. Obviously, this would be in the control of the town with respect to town employees. Staggered work hours, remote parking with carpool and shuttle service, and a shared bike program. But shared bike programs are becoming more popular on Long Island as well. And then access management policies. These would come under the auspices of the site plan approval process, where you limit the number of conflict points on the major roadways to reduce congestion by requiring shared access or cross access between sites, and shared parking to try to reduce the amount of paved area, impervious area, with on properties that have that could have different operating hours and different peak parking demand hours.
Okay, so thank you. That's an awful lot to think about of our built environment, our road structure, and what we can do about transportation. Before we go on to other recommendations, just want to put this in the perspective of the natural history of the area and the environmental challenges that we face. The natural history is largely responsible for the existing land uses and conditions that we have. The terminal moraine of the Wisconsin glaciation, or about where the glacier stopped about 12,000 years ago, represents the high ground and deepest groundwater reserves, and that's indicated on this map in these dark green and then that beige area in between that. So water drains very quickly through these deposits, recharging the upper glacial aquifer, which is a key resource, and the glacier left sand and gravel materials, which is being mined today. And there is also a 6-mile-long glacial meltwater stream extending from 3 Mile Harbor to the Atlantic Ocean, which has left creeks and wetlands and fertile soils adjacent to the meltwater stream, or where Round Swamp Farm is today. So what are our major potential threats and to the groundwater quality in the area? Well, some of the land uses, we've got the former municipal landfill, mulching and organic composting facilities, mining activities, storage and use of hazardous and toxic chemicals, sanitary waste, stormwater runoff, fertilizers, and pesticides. And then on the right side of the screen there are some of the existing regulations, from sole source aquifer, which is a designation, to special groundwater protection area, Suffolk County Sanitary Code, East Hampton Water Protection District, et cetera. So we've divided the recommendations into these categories of controlling fugitive dust and vehicle track out, improving the visual quality, protecting the ground and drinking water quality, potential land use and zoning strategies, open space and greenway connections, county policies and programs, and transportation, which you've already heard. So starting with controlling fugitive dust and vehicle track out recommendations, the town board has already acted to work with the highway department to continue the regular sweeping and cleaning at a more intense level than regular streets in the town. Also was the adoption of the vehicle track out prohibition, amending Chapter 167 of the code, and amending the agreement with the county for managing Springs Fireplace Road. Also recommending amending the site plan requirements to require dust control plans. And in the report, we give a number of specifications as to what would be asked for and how that would be done. Also, to require best management practices to control fugitive dust for all dust-generating activities, certainly for new activities, and then to explore whether some of these could be done for existing ones. Everything from what, some of them seem common sense: reduce vehicle speeds, restrict activities during high wind conditions, restrict access to just one place, require vegetative screening and windbreaks, require truck covering, pave certain roads. Washington Avenue has been mentioned as a priority. And then there are even physical improvements from the access from a site to the town roads. The next slide shows examples of rock pads, which is on the left, at the top left. Then there are shaker racks on the top right, and then even wheel washers on the bottom. Okay, now Peter's going to talk about some visual quality improvements.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. One of the priorities that came forward in the public discussion was the need to improve the visual character of the corridor. Obviously, some impacts are going to happen anyway, but a lot of the things that people talked about is just being able to see all of that industrial activity. So to the extent that it can be screened, it will improve things for everybody. So we did an inventory, I think shown on the next slide, shows really the south part of the corridor, which is on the top. It's sort of a mix of sort of screening types in our inventory. There are tree belts, there are lawns. Some of the properties have fences, some have hedges, some have a combination of things. And the north part of the corridor has pretty much a heavy screen of vegetation along much of it. So obviously protecting as much of the existing vegetation as possible will go a long way toward maintaining what visual character there is. On the next slide shows recommendations for combining screening with fencing. Can we turn to the next slide, please? Right, so we thought that some of the more successful approaches that had already been made is sort of combining lawn areas with trees, with fencing and hedges, really in combination to improve the sort of character of the roadside, make it nice and park-like, and then also to restrict the visual access into some of the properties. The next slide shows some of the strategies for beautification. It should be sort of modifying site planning standards so that as properties come forward for redevelopment, to institute some of those enhanced screening techniques, to encourage public and private partnerships for tree planting and landscape management, to build on the improvements that were recently made to the corridor, but to do things like planting trees and actually take care of the trees so they survive to maturity. And then part of that is working with landowners, doing more outreach and education, so get people to work together. Now back to you, Lisa.
All right, thank you. So in terms of protecting the ground and drinking water resources from toxic and hazardous chemicals, we recommend amending the site plan standards so that there would be more standards for the safeguarding to protect against accidental spills and for the storage of toxic and hazardous materials. The planning board is doing a lot of this right now, but putting it in the code puts the developers on notice of what's required, and also to require a submission of a complete list of the chemicals that are going to be stored or used on site. Developing educational materials about how a business procures the materials to minimize the toxic stored at the site at any one time, and how the materials should be stored, kept in containers of good condition that are watertight, how to handle them, prevent spills by using additional containers, disposal, and emergency response. To continue the regular inspection by the fire marshal, which is already occurring, but make sure there's enough resources for that activity to continue, and to develop and maintain a registry for toxic and hazardous waste, combining the list that the Suffolk County Health Department combines with what that town has, so everybody has the most up-to-date list. In terms of the mining impacts, pursue the opportunity to adopt legislation requiring groundwater monitoring for mining. There's been some initial action on this. We'd like to help and encourage this move forward. Support and participate in the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health mining impact study that is ongoing, that's being coordinated in the town with the Town Natural Resources Department. Actively participate in the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation mining permits and renewals. Coordinate with the DEC on mulching operations. Next slide, please. There's a variety of planning and zoning techniques that can be explored for how they can help the area. This is a copy of an excerpt of the existing zoning map showing the variety of zones that exist along Springs Fireplace Road. There's commercial industrial zoning and commercial service zoning flanked by residential zoning from half acre to 1 acre to A3 and then all the way up to A5 when you get to the Sherrill Farm. The colors here represent the overlay districts, with the yellow being agricultural overlay. The peachish colors are the affordable housing overlay. So the potential land use and zoning tools to consider: is there an opportunity in this area to meet more of the town's affordable housing needs? Everything the town does is always looking through that lens to see whether there's an appropriate place. Options to create additional zoning categories to support new business opportunities and the town's goals to transition to 100% renewable energy, something like a clean industry zone. There's an opportunity to examine and update the development intensity allowed in the commercial industrial zone. Currently, there's a 50% building coverage that's allowed, which is higher than in the surrounding towns, and it's also not aligned with the Suffolk County Department of Health Services regulations. As an example, the Hampton town and commercial industrial zones allow between 20 and 30% building coverage, depending on what zoning district is. Riverhead is in the process of updating their comprehensive plan, and they talk about floor area ratio rather than coverage, and that's looking at the several floors, but that is proposed to go down to 0.25, which would be about a 25%. Southold has 20 to 30%, depending on the zone. And then the commercial service zone in East Hampton has a maximum building coverage of 20%. So the CI zone in East Hampton hasn't been changed since 1985, whereas a lot of the other zoning restrictions have gotten updates and have been tinkered. So something to look at here. Further, in terms of potential land use and zoning tools, build incentives into maximum lot coverage and setback standards to get the landscape that you desire. So one way to do that would be to reduce the lot coverage from what's now permitted 75% to, just throw out a number, say something like 65% or something along that line. But then the incentive could be to allow 75% for lots that coordinate access with the neighboring lots. So you're getting something that you want as a result of that. Or you could waive the side yard setbacks for lots coordinating access with the adjoining lots so that you don't have to make them meet that setback. It's very important to get a 50-foot vegetated buffer along the road, so maybe go back up to that 75% coverage if you're achieving that buffer area. But then the issue that you heard earlier today is lots that don't have any buildings, and that really needs to be further examined. First of all, it's got to be explicit in the code that creating a use on a lot requires site plan approval and a building permit, and that there needs to be, the coverage restrictions of that needs to be examined and reduced from the 75% that's currently allowed. So Another tool would be something that the town does in all of the residential zones, which is to require what they call open space subdivisions, which is allowing the same number of lots in a subdivision as would be allowed under the existing zoning, but allowing them on a smaller portion of the lot, thereby getting an open space, a chunk of open space reserve. And again, this has been done throughout the town for 40, 50 years now. This zone has not benefited from those updates that the other sections of the code have. It's important to take a update of the table of uses and the special permit conditions, to be working on that with the planning department. And as I already touched on, to amend the zoning code to explicitly require site plan approval for all commercial activities, regardless of the need for building permit. All right, Peter, back to.
Okay, so this is the concept plan that was developed for the Hamlet studies. It was adopted as part of the comprehensive plan in 2019. Hard to believe it's already been 5 years. So as part of the current process, we've been looking at this. We didn't update it, so it remains in place. And we want to emphasize this is not a master plan for future use. It doesn't say this is what must happen in the future. What it really is a concept that demonstrates a way of thinking about the area as time goes on. So as Lisa said, sort of coordinating open space as properties are developed, to coordinate conservation of open space, some of it which is already town-owned, some of it like the farmland along 3 Mile Harbor Road, which is privately owned, but really thinking about these things as if you were doing a master plan for the whole site, but really just to coordinate as each development happens, how it fits into what's around it. So encouraging phased redevelopment, where possible, that would sort of extend roads and connect them together rather than everyone building their own roads. To have phases that extend and connect the open space and connect trails through the property if that's appropriate. And to start with logical first steps like improving Washington Avenue and making that easier for everyone to use, to do things like just closing off 2 curb cuts and having a shared curb cut between 2 properties that can reduce, again, the visual access to sort of the industrial areas beyond the screening, and to really work with landowners to pursue shared objectives, which I think we've identified many shared objectives which can be worked on. So part of that is how do we get people together? How do we continue these conversations between landowners in the town and the neighborhood? To move forward with a lot of stuff which is fairly easy to do if it can be coordinated. So the next slide shows some of the goals and objectives just for open space and conservation. Some of these are fairly simple to do, like creating permanent buffers on both sides of Tanbark Creek and making sure to protect areas with high water table, establishing public pedestrian bicycle paths, sort of going beyond the bike lanes to maybe off-road paths, and then to create public park facilities that are coordinated with that, and pursue other implementation strategies and actions like acquiring open space if that's appropriate for parks, pursuing the present protection of farmland, developing plan for some of the public properties around the landfill that aren't really designated for any particular use, to connect to the maritime walking district that's been proposed, and as it says here, preserving open space networks and trails as properties are developed, and really make better use of the land which is sort of left over and right now, but hadn't really been thought of as part of a comprehensive scheme. So really, again, just thinking in a coordinated fashion for some of these things that are not that hard to do if you can coordinate them. And then we've heard already from Vin about some of the potential town policies affecting traffic, like controlling the days and hours at the recycling center, to really think about future use of the senior center in relationship to how much traffic would be generated and at what time, and then to think perhaps of land acquisitions to direct the way traffic is developed from future uses.
Okay, so what's next? Let's continue the review of the report, seek input, feedback from the citizens, from the property owners, from the public at large, from the special groups, process the feedback, make revisions, establish priorities, do a SECRA review, conduct a public hearing, review the comments, make changes as necessary, with the end goal of adopting the report or some report into the comprehensive plan and starting to implement it with work groups and agencies, the planning department for zoning and the highway superintendent and planning and engineer for road improvements, natural resources department and fire department for education, toxic and hazardous registry, and so forth. So that's kind of a snapshot of what's in the report. I don't know if there are questions or how we want to go forward, but I'm here.
Hi, Lisa. I'll just start. I really appreciate the work that you and Peter and Vin have done on this project, and I think it is a really good reflection of how important community engagement is in developing these studies and hearing from the folks that live in these areas, drive them, use them day in and day out, and have lived there over time to witness the changes that have happened. That kind of knowledge is so important for us to be able to develop a plan. For me, the number one goal is the protection of our groundwater, and anything that we can do to protect our groundwater. I think it would be an insult to people's intelligence for me to have to say why that's important. Also, to minimize all the environmental impacts as we partner and recognize and allow the importance of central industrial area, commercial industrial areas and commercial zones for our economy here in town. I like the idea that it's not one side against the other, but developing a program that puts everybody in the same place at the same table. I think that's essential. I wrote notes about before you got to the end about having Steve Lynch involved in traffic and other departments, and I encourage that happening quickly. I think it's also important for us, and you mentioned zoning regulations not having been changed for CI since 1985. I think it's also, as we protect our groundwater, et cetera, that we're also looking and planning for the future in these areas now. We've seen in other areas in town when we haven't looked at the future and future uses after the uses end in time on some of these properties, what happens next? And I'd like to see that incorporated. I think that's something we should get going on. But mostly I'd like the end slide, because with studies, we don't want to see them, everybody come out and talk about them once, and then they kind of sit on a shelf. So I'm encouraging my colleagues and staff to get moving on the next steps, and so that we can move forward on this plan. I really think it's a well-developed study. And again, I thank you, Kathy, for the way that this happened with incorporating right from the get-go, again, that essential community engagement of the business owners, the residents, and yourselves, the experts on planning. So I encourage moving forward as fast as we can on the recommendations.
Thank you. I'll jump in at this end. Just to make one point clear, I did talk to our Chief Fire Marshal. We do have a full list of all the chemicals stored on site, just to be very clear on that. The other area I kind of speak to here, and I think Kate brought this up earlier, is that in order for any project such as this to be successful, it is about partnership, and having the right forum to engage the business community, I think, is critical. I think as a town as a whole, the concept of clean industry is something we are looking at. Certainly within the business committee, that's going to be one of our key areas. But understanding how some of these measures can be worked in with the existing commercial businesses to help them succeed as well, I think is key. And that dialogue is something I think we need to ensure we have throughout this process.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, I agree with what the previous board members have said. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into this study. I fully support moving it forward and trying to refine some of the information and what we want to come out of it. I agree with Kate and Tom that I'm hoping this is everybody working together. I think that, the businesses are very important to our community, as is the beauty and the compatibility with residential neighborhoods and traffic and all the other environmental concerns. So I would just ask the public to give us comments, please. I'm going to discuss this tonight with the Spring CAC, I'm sure in some more depth. And I would like to hear from everybody, people who think that this is a really bad idea or there's very bad information. That will be most helpful to us to make sure that we're on the right track here, or people who support it. But I think the plan, at least from my standpoint, is to move forward with it. So the more information we can get to make sure that the study is as good and as thorough as it can be, the better off we'll be as a town moving forward.
So I wanted to bring up 2 points, or maybe 3 points. One is at our last board meeting, we noticed for public hearing, and the public hearing is this Thursday at 6:30, that we're looking to add approximately 20.5 acres of land located at 20 Springs Fireplace Road and 109 and 107 Old Accabonac Highway. It's right behind the Cheryl Foster. The properties consist of 3 building lots with an easement over 16 acres to be used for agricultural purposes. This farmland contains prime agricultural soils, but has been underutilized for many years. The land is primarily cleared and ready for production, and also contains 2 agricultural buildings. So hopefully the community will come out and voice their thoughts on that acquisition. And again, that's this Thursday. So when Peter put up the map, it was, I believe, the zoning category, it was yellow, but it's hopefully soon to be in town ownership. The other thing I wanted to bring up, Vin brought it up. So later this week, the town has a kickoff meeting scheduled with Suffolk County Legislator Ann Welker and the Suffolk County Department of Public Works to discuss the County Road 40, 3 Mile Harbor Road reconstruction slated for 2026. We've had internal meetings here so that we could put together a list of what we want to raise in that meeting. Representatives from our planning department, natural resources, highway, and the East Hampton Town Police Department have been in discussions. Jeremy Samuelson, our planning director, put together a draft memo that has been circulating among all of the folks that are involved. And we're hoping that that's going to be a community dialogue once we've had our first meeting with Suffolk County DPW. And then lastly, on page 17 in the presentation, you show the proposed roundabout for the intersection of Springs Fireplace Road and 3 Mile Harbor. For folks that may not remember, I think it was our last work session in December. That was a presentation. I think it was Ray Tobias's last meeting before he retired, where he presented 4 options, and this was the option that the town board had supported. It does require parkland alienation, and that's something we need to keep in mind. But I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because that's a critical piece, is that, moving cars through, as noted in the presentation, a number of our intersections are failing, and we know because we drive those roads every day. I did have a question, though, regarding when we look at next steps. What's the time frame that we want to put in place? Like Ian has his spring CAC tonight. Okay. I have the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC on April 1st. I mean, I would like us to come up with, how long are we seeking input, right, for this process before we're ready to, get to the secret review and schedule this for public hearing?
Okay. Do you want to set a time frame now?
I think the board should. I mean, I think that we should, discuss. Do we want to say by the end of April? Do we want to, sooner than that? To Tom's point, just so you know, since the introduction, we've been very communicative with the business community in the corridor and getting their input. We had special sessions for them, just as we did with the corridor group and folks from the CACs. When this launched, we've let them know along the way when we're having presentations. I don't think, though, we did with this one, but we still have email addresses for folks in that corridor, so we could send them these presentations and get their input. So I just, you know, what makes sense? Is it the month of April and we come back in first work session in May and say, okay, these are the comments we heard. What, you know, yay or nay, do we need to make changes to the study, you know, and are we ready to go to public hearing?
I think that's a good time frame.
The first or the second work session in May, I think would be,
Yeah, I support that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time frame to me as well. I think I mean, of course, there's a chance that we get so many comments and we have to make changes that, you know, I don't want to put it set in stone, but I think it's a great idea to make this this great summary and presentation available so people understand the essence of what's in there and also the full report, of course. So
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time.
And we do have a page on the website just dedicated to this, so we should get these, right now, these materials are located in work session materials, but we should get them also posted on the page for the Springs Corridor Study.
So I just have one question, and that is the idea of the properties that are existing that can continue to operate without a CO. And that reflects a gap in our code. I propose that that's something we can close up quickly, and I would like to investigate doing so quickly. That is pretty much, to me, in the world of planning language that I've learned from you, Lisa, low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
That makes perfect sense. For no other type of business can operate without a certificate of occupancy. They would be closed down, there would be stop work orders. But because there's that gap in the code for when the storage type facilities that have no real structures on them, that they can open without even, you know, finishing the conditions of their site plan. I'd like to look into that, and, you know, I don't know how my fellow board members feel about just pulling that one out and not having to wait to go through more time on that.
I'm open to looking
Completely
at that, yeah.
supportive.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
More work, Jeremy.
Jeremy, did you have any comments that you wanted to make? You're good?
I just have one other comment on the mulching operations. So that is obviously something the town is permitted to do by the DEC. That permit will be coming up for renewal in the next year, and we will be actively working with the DEC to look at options that are best for the groundwater quality.
Great. Yeah. There's a bunch of best management practices for mulching in the report to be considering too. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Peter and Vin, for joining us today.
Well, you're quite welcome.
Yes. Okay, so next up, we have an all-electric discussion led by Councilmember Kate Rogers. Why don't we give a minute for folks to clear the room? We're just going to take a minute for folks to clear the room.
Okay, great.
Don't take it personally, Kate, that
No one is here for this discussion. A little personally, but it's okay.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's nice to meet you. Okay, great. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Oh. Thank
That's
you.
funny.
All right for Tom?
Yeah.
We're losing board members.
Why don't we just take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
LTV, are you good with that? Just a 5-minute break?
Yeah, we can take a 5-minute break. One moment.
Building suspense.
All right, we're going on break now. You're clear. All right. How is that?
Well, I'm just,
Audio should be coming through. I'm hearing it on my end. I'm hearing it on our broadcast over here.
okay, let me just,
No volume on
so,
LTV.
yeah, I'm hearing that they haven't heard anything of Kate's presentation.
So let me go to YouTube.
Yeah, I'm hearing it on YouTube.
Okay. Let me find out what.
It's back. I just got texted that the audio's back.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, Kate, you're going to have to start from the top.
Okay, let me rewrap that for folks who didn't hear. We apologize for the technical difficulty. So we're talking about the all-electric, a recommendation that came in July 2023 from the Energy and Sustainability Committee, and they made a recommendation that the town board adopts legislation that would ban fossil fuel for new construction and substantial renovation, which is over 50% renovation for residents in the town of East Hampton, and that would commence in 2025. That is 1 year before the state ban, which has been passed and signed by the governor, that on all electric building law, which requires most new buildings in New York State to use electric heat and appliances instead of fossil fuels. This recommendation was made in July of 2023 initially. We had a work session presenting it to the town board. At that time, we subsequently had 2 further discussions on it. There were questions asked at that time of my fellow town board members, one related to grid resiliency and one related to impact on local companies that provide fossil fuels. And so subsequently to that discussion, I received an email from Thomas Falcone, who's the CEO of LIPA, assuring that the grid is resilient to any new increase in electric use for both if the town were to adopt this legislation in 2025, and also more importantly, for the statewide recommendation that will happen in 2026. Again, the recommendation from the Energy and Sustainability Committee relates to specifically new construction and substantial renovation, which means renovation over 50% of a home. It is for those 2 categories and those 2 categories only. While I do support a ban for heating and cooling systems, I do not support the recommendation when it comes to appliances. And as I said before, I'll state my reasoning and then we can just go down the line. So another development since that recommendation was made was last week we flipped the switch on the South Fork Wind Farm, and that added 132 megawatts of clean energy offshore wind power into our grid. I reminded folks that that was an answer to an RFP for more power during our peak uses and to cover those peak hours. Now, the reason why I support the ban for heating and cooling systems specifically, one, I think it'll support a just transition. By beginning a year earlier in East Hampton, for me, it creates a more just approach than the statewide rules that are coming down in 2026. It does not dictate a current change in building regulations for existing homes or structures whatsoever. There will be no change to the providers for most of the structures and residences in the town, as they are fueled by either gas or fossil fuels, except for folks who have elected to voluntarily make a change. So it doesn't affect any of the existing housing stock. This gives our community a chance to get a bit ahead of the state. My reasoning for not supporting the appliance part of the recommendation is the difference in expected useful lifespan of appliances versus heating and cooling systems. Also, the cost of electric stoves, as we know, is quite high right now, And I think that that's a burden that doesn't support making the change. The impact on fossil fuels being put into, greenhouse gases being put into our atmosphere is not a great enough impact to support that change at this time until those prices come down. Where we do get the bang for the buck here in East Hampton is in our heating and cooling systems, as every chimney is putting greenhouse gases in, either when you're making hot water or when particularly when you're heating your house. And the useful lifespan of heating and cooling systems is projected to be 15 to 25 years. So in general, most HVAC systems last 15 to 25 years, depending on the type of system, and of course, other contributing factors. So if we just do some of the math on that, in 2023, the building department issued 95 permits for new construction. We don't really have a way right now of telling when we're issuing building permits for additions, whether it's substantial or not, so I didn't include those at all. But if you times the lower amount of the useful years in service for the fossil fuel systems, you're talking about 95 times 15 years is like 1,000 years of burning fossil fuels continuing in East Hampton. In 2024 so far, we have 20 building permits for new construction in just the first 2 months of this year, and that we're looking at, if you times that by 15 years, that's 300 more additional years of burning fossil fuels, and we're only in March. So I can see a great benefit in reducing greenhouse gases with not a considerable impact to the folks who provide the fuels and not a shock to the grid if we pass this legislation to ban fossil fuels for heating, cooling systems, including hot water systems. And another reason why we brought this back is so that our new town board members had a chance. I don't know if I'm just going to reiterate this because I'm not sure if this was heard over the transmission, but since we had those the three discussions last year, we now have 2 new board members, and I asked the Energy and Sustainability Committee to meet with those board members, and I think it's important for those board members' voices to be heard on this issue.
Sure. I'd be happy to go first. I mean, this goes back to climate change more than anything else, and how the town can best go about addressing that issue. Looking through the data, the implementation of an all-electric policy on new construction or 50% renovation is a fairly easy win. Heat pumps have been used as one means of doing this for a long time. They're effective. I've talked to colleagues in Maine, in Canada, with far more extreme temperatures in terms of cold than we experience here, and they continue to work. I do think it's incumbent on us as a board in adopting this to include some public education concepts regarding maintenance. It's a very different system to what we use with current HVAC. So understanding how users get the longest life and the most efficient use out of these units is critical, as well as the type of units available to builders. Not everything has to look the same or be the same. Some can be more discreet in their appearance. I know some people have aesthetic concerns with heat pumps. So, I think that's a key aspect of this. The infrastructure, I was actually at that meeting when this was last discussed. It was a concern of mine. I've read through Mr. Falcone's report from LIPA, and certainly historically, in terms of the capability of the infrastructure to supply increased electrical output, it's definitively there. You talk about the sourcing because, moving to an all-electric, which is solely reliant on fossil fuels, kind of defeats the purpose. So, incumbent on this is not just the wind farm. I think we have to be looking at other concepts of what alternative energy sources are available, be it solar, wind is fantastic. There's other options out there for that as well. And, that goes into the infrastructure piece too, that we have here. While, the capacity is there, there are residents out there who experience brownouts in the summer. We had this discussion previously. I think, what is the infrastructure spending plan from LIPA in the future. We're seeing some of it. Certainly, they're investing in stronger electrical poles that can withstand winds of up to 135 miles an hour. I think that's key. But, you know, what are the battery facilities we may be looking at in the future? What does the network out here look like such that, you know, we can have reliable, consistent energy based on that? The final piece of this puzzle to me, too, is that the more we move to more all-electric, the more there is one provider. And the ability of households to manage pricing associated with electric, I know elsewhere we've seen in the country when there's peak demand in certain circumstances, you know, ensuring that our residents have the ability to choose their source of electricity, I think, is a key kind of concept that we need to look at down the line as we adopt this as well. So as much as possible, market demand can determine where this energy is coming source from, because I do believe on the whole in the public, there is demand for us to be using cleaner energy to fight climate change. So on the heating and the cooling, I'm supportive. On the appliance aspect, you know, I understand a lot of the kind of the concept of the air quality control in households, the possible leakages and lines that one sees when you have gas appliances for cooking in the household. I do think those are valid concerns. From a health perspective, for me, that is, it's fuzzy on the remit as to whether air quality inside the house is something that it's a town board's role to dictate. So I think there just needs to be more research done from that aspect of the policy before we can adopt something that really includes cooking appliances as well. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, Tom, and I just wanted to mention that the town board a number of years ago passed the infrastructure for CCA, and we're just we've met with the deputy supervisor from town of Southampton, who has actually they have RFPs out, and they're looking at how they're going to implement that program. And then we have a number of choices to make after that, whether we join together for more powerful buying, but offer a better price, and what that mix of that CCA will be in terms of fossil fuels and renewable energy. So as they go through the process, we have all of the legislative infrastructure set up for CCA. We're just seeing how the power flows and how we'll move about in the future. But that is a very important consideration that you mentioned about pricing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kate and Tom. I think great comments. I did have the opportunity to meet with the Energy Sustainability Committee, or at least a group of them. And look, I think this is an important concept for all the reasons that have been stated, not just for the town, but for the world. This is certainly a real issue, climate change and the need to move away from fossil fuels. My concerns, though, is I think that we're coming at this right now from all the reasons why we want to do it, and I think that those are all very good reasons. I just want to make sure there's no unintended consequences, and I think we have to really vet the downside of this. Importantly, I think I'm concerned about the potential regressive nature of this, that over the lifetime of an appliance, it pays for itself. But what does that do to, you know, a new affordable housing project? I have no idea. I think we should talk to affordable housing developers if we haven't, and maybe this information's out there. I'm very new here, obviously. I think we should talk to people in the heating and cooling business who do both electric and fossil fuels. I currently am an all-electric household. I'm a believer. I love including appliances, but I have a heater that's broken right now, and it's less than 10 years old, and I can't replace the part. You know, I got to get a whole new system because of the nature of the technology change. It's you know, like cell phone chargers. So it's not plug and play like, you know, fossil fuel systems sometimes are, because they've been around for so long. So I'm not saying that I don't support this. I do generally. I just want to make sure that we're very, very careful about unintended consequences. And I think that with the enthusiasm of how big of a problem this is or an issue for the world and for the town going forward. I just want to make sure we're not missing anything that we haven't considered fully. Large-scale projects are another question I have. I don't know how this translates to huge spaces. The answer is probably, if it's cost more, we still should do it because those are the biggest users of or consumers of energy. But I just want to definitively know, what does it mean? You know, are we going to then be doing a project that, you know, is millions of dollars more expensive because of that? And I'm just not sure. I think emergency generation of power is an important issue. The windmills are online, which is great. It's new. You know, I don't think it's flawless technology yet. It's great that we're one of the first people to do this, but, you know, usually things improve over time. Want to make sure that, you know, we've recently talked about installing natural gas generation for town project. And the reason is because we might need that as opposed to propane or some other alternative, or certainly not electric, because if the electric grid goes down, we don't have power. I think grid resilience has largely been answered, or power supply as a whole, power production supply. But, you know, I've experienced brownouts out here. I think it's those moments, if it's only a handful of times of the year and the rest of the year everything works perfectly, it's still a problem. So I want to dig a little bit deeper on that, although I think that has probably been answered. I just know I've heard things about improvements. It's not just about having the power at production, but how do you get it to all of the users along the way? You know, is our grid, you know, resilient enough to have, you know, handle the additional flow of energy? And I'm not saying in any means I think that the negative or my questions are the reality. I just want to make sure that we have them definitively answered before I'd be comfortable voting for this. And the other thing at the center of all of my comments is that I get it. We want to set an example here, and we want to maybe go beyond what the state is going to do. And I'm fully supportive of that. But the state's going to do it in one more year. You know, 2026. We're talking about doing it for 2025. I would hate to get ahead of it and then have the state legislation, you know, somehow contradict ours. And maybe that won't happen. But, you know, a lot of people have said, I heard in presentations before today, that this won't impact a lot of people. Well, so by definition, it's not making the biggest impact. So part of it is the statement we're making and setting the groundwork for a future that I think is going to be either all electric or certainly much more electric. I just don't want to rush it and sort of make any errors here in the 1 year between we're talking about doing this in the state. So, you know, I don't know where that leaves me. I'm supportive in theory for sure. I still have questions to be answered, and I want to make sure that we're exercising caution and doing a thorough review of all of the considerations.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. I support, and what I said back in July, I support all electric heating and cooling systems and hot water heaters beginning in January 1st, 2025. I do not support all electric for appliances. That hasn't changed. Regarding your comments, Ian, as far as affordable housing is concerned, just the Cantwell Court project is going to be all electric. That was planned from the beginning, and we're looking to put solar on those projects. East Hampton Housing Authority, when they do their projects, they're also all electric. They're putting solar on the Avalon project in Montauk. We gave them community development block grant monies in order to get the ball rolling. I believe it was I think it was 3 Mile Harbor project, the new project. So it is being incorporated already in affordable housing projects out here. So I think at this point then, I know David is obviously still doing the walkthrough with the Army Corps in Montauk, so we'll need to get his input. I don't recall where he netted out back in July, but if we have, you know, 3 are in support, then I think we can move forward with drafting legislation. And it sounds like, Ian, you've got an open mind, so it's
certainly.
so
I
it's
share all,
about,
you know, I get it.
We could draft the legislation, take it to public hearing, and hear from the community.
I think getting it to public hearing, we'll hear more from the community.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, look, what I've learned, and I don't know if it's right, but it's certainly something I believe, that if you have an idea of something you want to do, try to seek out the best opponent of you, and I just haven't seen that yet in this process. It's probably been played out, but I think that, you know, this is, again, I'm supportive of the concept here. I just want to make sure that we hear all of the reasons why this might not work and make sure we're prepared to address those.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so now we're just going to keep moving, and we're going to talk now, we have draft legislation for FOIL. Rob, if you could, you know,
so the
brief
impetus
us on this.
Sure. So the impetus behind this proposed code change is to take some of the burden off the town clerk's office and then to streamline and make the procedure for FOIL requests more efficient. As the current process works, the town clerk receives the request and then transmits that request to the departments that maintain the records sought, and the town attorney's office is CC'd on that correspondence. And before a response is sent to the applicant, the responsive documents are theoretically supposed to come to the town attorney's office to review. What we're finding is some of the responses are not going to the town attorney's office first, and responses are just being sent out. So what we're hoping is that if the town attorney's office is the receiver of the FOIL request, the town attorney's office will then notify the department of the request, ask the department to gather those documents, submit them back to the town attorney's office, who will then in turn review for confidentiality, make sure the documents are even responsive, and then we'll send those out to the applicant. Carol had suggested that we may need to add a definition, which is not in the current proposed legislation, of records access officer. So I'm waiting to hear back from the Committee on Local Government. If they say we need to add that title, the town attorney's office will be the records access officer, and I could have that on the next work session for discussion again.
Okay, sounds good.
Rob, is that a fairly typical setup across municipalities on Long Island for the attorney's office to be the?
Well, some municipalities have it like we have it as the town clerk, because they're the keeper of all documents. Some do have the town attorney's office. And then other municipalities have it where each department has their own FOIL officer, so that the requests go to that specific department and to that individual in that department, who then processes the request.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just felt that, you know, the number of FOIL requests have just skyrocketed. It's gone up exponentially, and it's a real burden for the clerk's office, and the town attorney's office is fully staffed. And we just thought it would make sense, again, checking to make sure things are responsive. Sometimes the town attorney's office has a better idea who may have the materials that are being requested as opposed to the town clerk, and also to make sure, you know, it's properly redacted. So I think it just makes a lot of sense to move this way. So we'll wait for Rob to get a response from the Association of Towns before we can notice it for public hearing. We're going to have to skip on the FIMP update, as David could give us an update at our next meeting on April 2nd. And if there's something newsworthy, we will certainly put it out in a press statement. So let's move on to the Ditch Plains update. Kate, please.
So we're moving along with the Ditch Plains project. Right now, where our RFP for the coastal engineering is still open until March 21st. If you haven't already contacted our purchasing department, please do so by contacting Jean Carrozza. We have had a robust so far response, which I'm very happy to report to folks, and we'll see how that goes, and Jeannie will be updating us on another round of bids. But that is the part of the process where we are at right now. As I've stated before, we know what project we're looking at. We're looking at a recreation of the dune system at Ditch Plains, which was wiped out in the last 3 storms, and that will provide necessary flooding protection to the Ditch Plains neighborhood. That's the first phase. That's the first option we're taking on. We're in contact with the DEC as well for the expedited permitting. We're just looking to close out that RFP, accept a bid, and get the coastal engineering plans drawn up. That's the next phase that we're waiting on as we go through the RFP process. So that's where I am right now.
Great, thank you, Kate. So now we can move on to liaison reports.
I have no reports this week.
Okay.
Kate? Yes, so yesterday, the Energy and Sustainability Committee met. They talked about of course, the all-electric legislation. That's where I got the information from a report on what's going on with Southampton and their pursuit of CCA, which of course we are very interested in doing as well. And also the next item up for what the committee would recommend to us to go to public hearing on and adoption is the energy roadmap that we heard in December. I can again circulate those presentations. I did ask the committee, since it's still in draft form, to add if they would consider passing their recommendation to also add a sustainability officer for the town to manage all of these resiliency, climate change goals that we have. We're seeing this across municipalities in New York State. We can designate a person already in staff as a sustainability officer, but it brings all of the goals of the town, composting, increasing the solarized program kind of into one person's purview. And they agreed with that. They're going to make that recommendation. And then the next thing up is to have that adopted, put it out for, have a public hearing, have it adopted, and get that roadmap adopted after comments from the public and any tweaks we need to do into the comprehensive plan. And that was the gist of the meeting yesterday. And that's, you're going to talk about the event we went to?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the end of my liaison report.
Okay, yeah, I've got a spring CSC meeting tonight. There'll be a lot to report after that for sure. I did have a meeting last weekend at the Parsons Blacksmith Shop. I have driven by that building a million times, and it's a beautiful building, but inside is really special. And there was a group of volunteers, the Friends of Parsons Blacksmith Shop, there to help clean it up and try to make it a place that's more frequently visited. I met the blacksmith that the town has on staff and was just very, very impressed with the building, the fact that it's there in the group and the passion behind it. So looking forward to making that even more a part of the community. And of course, we do have it in the budget for this year to redo some of the siding on that building. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Ian. So I have some news. The town is going to be acquiring additional municipal property on Abraham's Path as we continue our expansion of municipal land acquisition with the proposed purchase of 7.3 acres on Abraham's Path in Amagansett for $3.875 million. Situated at 403 Abraham's Path. Actually, Joanne, if you could put up this slide. Situated at 403 Abraham's Path, this parcel of land would be purchased with municipal funds and stems from a right of first refusal clause in the original contract with Joel and the late Alexandra Cabaz. The town purchased that 7-acre flag lot now designated for the new senior center in September of 2021 for $1.63 million. While there are no plans for the property at this time, this acquisition will help address the town's future need for municipal community resources. This acquisition provides us with the flexibility needed to tailor future initiatives for the evolving needs of our community. It represents an investment in the long-term sustainability and prosperity of East Hampton, ensuring that we can continue to thrive in a manner that benefits all residents. So as you can see up on the screen, we have the Terry King Ball Field, which is just over 12, almost 12 and a quarter acres. We've got the Lieutenant Lee Hayes Youth Park, which we had done at a CPF acquisition. It's now 4.3 acres along that corridor. We had already, back in September of 2021, as I said, acquired the flag lot from the Cabaz family, 7 acres for the new senior center, and now we will be acquiring after public hearing and a town board vote, 7.3 acres. So that's an exciting development. I also, Joanne, you can take that down. Thank you. I also just wanted to share with my colleagues, I don't know if I really had a chance to talk to you after last Thursday's event, which was a momentous occasion out at Stony Brook, Southampton campus, as we flipped the switch on the South Fork Wind Project and a clean energy future. It took vision for us, the town board, to be the first, vision powered by the understanding of what was at stake for our coastal community, vision to adopt a policy to meet 100% of annual community-wide energy consumption needs with renewable energy sources by 2030. And that was a policy the town board adopted back in 2014 during the Larry Cantwell administration. And this made us the first municipality in New York State to set such ambitious energy goals. And now East Hampton, as Lena mentioned when she called in today, is the first community in New York State to bring ashore the power of offshore wind. I was thrilled to share that moment with New York State Governor Kathy Hochul and United States Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland. And I did mention to some, it was a highlight of my career in public service. Then later that day, the governor met with East End supervisors for a roundtable discussion, and that included Town of Southampton Supervisor Maria Moore, Town of Southold Supervisor Al Krupski, Town of Shelter Island Supervisor Amber Brock Williams, and also joining us was Town of Babylon Supervisor Rich Schaefer. The governor spent about an hour with us. She was very generous with her time, and she shared her initiatives for 2024 and also her love for the beauty and history of the East End community. Then she opened the floor to the rest of us to share our priorities. So the topics we discussed, including affordability and live here, work here, the pro-housing community designation. As of now, it was Babylon and the town which are pursuing those. And we talked about ADUs, and she was very interested in understanding how they were being used in our community and other communities across the East End. We also talked about the importance of the South Fork commuter connection and the need for the MTA to install additional rail sidings so that we can offer more trains. I cited the example that we had posted a job for administrative assistant in the town. We had 15 responses, and the closest respondent lived in Quogue. So it's really incumbent that we know how staff members and teachers in our schools are using the South Fork commuter connection, and then the town, we've contracted with the Hampton Hopper to meet the trains and bring folks to town hall and all the different schools and businesses out here, and that there's only 2 trains in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, and we really need, if we want to continue to be able to, find staffing and provide services for our community, that investment in the Long Island Railroad needs to be made. We also talked about a regional approach that's needed for the waste issue and glass recycling, and also the need to protect farmland and keep it in production. So, the governor now has 4 very experienced representatives on Long Island that we can reach out to. There's Rob Calarco, who's the Assistant Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs for Long Island, Stevens Martinez, the Deputy Director of Intergovernment Affairs for Long Island, Talia Olea, who's the Suffolk County Regional Representative, and I have to say an East Hampton High School graduate, and John Bouvier is now the Eastern Long Island rep. So the governor from John called me this morning and explained that there are going to be many more of these events to come. The governor is very interested in the issues that we're addressing and how she can be of service. So it was really an incredible afternoon. So that's what I have for my liaison report. And now I guess we can move on to resolutions.
Let's start with Resolution 2024-363. Apologies. Resolved that the Town of East Hampton Human Services Department is hereby authorized to obtain an umbrella license from the Motion Picture License Corporation at an annual cost of $349.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Want me to read David, Kathy?
That'd be great. Ian.
Resolution 2024-364 to reappoint Philip O'Connell to the CPF Advisory Board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution 365, this is to appoint part-time laborer Rick McFarland at an hourly rate of $23.9847 per hour, effective March 13th, 2024.
Second.
But this one needs to be amended. I got an email from Kathleen.
Yeah,
So it needs to be, it's effective March 20th, 2024.
Effective March 20th, 2024. So I move the resolution as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Cheryl, you're caught up or you want to wait?
365, right?
Yes, yes.
The date.
20th.
Effective March 20th.
Resolution 366, this is to make Palmanock Path campsite official. This is a pilot program that's already been existing successfully. There is no cost to the town. It's just making the property at Benson Point, tax map 300-26-1-1.1, officially a campsite.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution 367, this is to amend Resolution 266, which was proposed renovations to the Montauk Playhouse Community Center. Change of regulations dictated a change of equipment due to Freon regulations. There's no cost, which remains at $13,930,005.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution 368, this is to approve cost for Stephen Hans Path Ball Field project. There was a design issue with causing a problem with balls ricocheting, and there has now been a design to remedy that problem at a total cost of $16,808.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 369, this is to authorize payment of Riverhead Building Supply for a 2023 invoice in the amount of $113.29.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I have Resolution 2024-370, and this is to accept proposal for services for 2024 from Cityscape Consultants, whereas the town board entered into agreement with Cityscape Consultants for professional engineering service for wireless telecommunication facility consulting services, whereas wireless applications submitting to the planning department from January 1st, 2024 to current present date for review shall be forwarded to Cityscape to determine completeness, whereas the services and review of Tier 1 small wireless applications not to exceed $800 per site, Tier 2 not to exceed $1,800 per site, Tier 3 modifications and upgrades not to exceed $5,000 per site, and $1,500 per visit when appearing in person for a related planning board work session, public hearing as approved in advance, $1,000 per meeting when attending via video conference for related planning board work sessions. Whereas any additional services outside of the fixed fees, a regulatory not to exceed $350 per hour, senior engineer, $285 per hour, planner, $200 per hour, and field engineering planning travel time at $75 per hour. Be it resolved that the town enters into agreement for the services outlined above, retroactive to January 1st, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 2024-371 is to amend Resolution 2024-286, and this is for the East Hampton Commuter Connection Shuttle with Hampton Hopper. The estimated number of days of service has now been updated from 240 to 254, subject to modification based on Long Island Railroad alterations in schedule at a per diem rate of $2,054.85.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 2024-372. This is to appoint the following individuals to the Business Committee for the calendar year 2024. This will be amended to also include Mark Klejam.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to go into exec?
Yes, I make a motion to go into executive session for CPF, advice of counsel, and personnel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, Councilmember Lease just walked in, and we just did the resolution to go into executive session. Thank you, LTV.
Thank you very